Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And roll call, do we have any board members online? I'm sorry?
Mr. Bomersky's online.
Just who's here?
Mr. Bomersky's online.
Mr. Bomersky is online. Very well. Mr. Bomersky, let us know if at any point you can't hear us or if you'd like to say anything. All right, at this point, I will entertain a motion to amend the agenda as follows. We will first discuss policies 239 and 715. Then we will add the first reading of policy 715 as an exception under 712.1C of the Sunshine Act, and a matter arising during the previous 24 hours, and which is de minimis and requires no expenditure of funds. We will then move to the education and programs portion of the agenda, and then we will come back to the remainder of the policies. The reason for this is because of the schedules of various administrators and board members this evening. So is there a motion to amend the agenda as I've described?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Johnson. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Donato. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Very well, the agenda is amended. We will move to residents' request to address the board.
The only resident this evening is John Hottenstein.
Hello, my name is John Hottenstein. Graduate of Hempfield. My wife's a graduate of Hempfield. Both my kids are graduates of Hempfield, including one in 2024. Live here in Landisville. My family and I have hosted 2 foreign exchange students. I understand there is a possible change of the policy concerning exchange students. The only concern I have is outside the technical stuff or the administrative stuff. I don't want to see anything that would necessarily negatively impact the experience that students would have if they're exchange students. Be able to participate when we had exchange students, and we're planning on probably having more, for them to participate in the school as a typical American kid and get that experience. So I want to make sure that no policy would have unintended consequences to take that away from them. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hottenstein. Any other residents' requests? All right, very well. That brings us to policy 239. Mr. Brossman. Or Dr. Brossman.
Hello. All right. Is this the proposal?
Yes. Yes.
Ah, there it is. Thank you. The changes. So you can see the current policy and then the suggested changes. Point 1 talks about the kids being 16 years of age or older. With point 1, we really don't need point number 2. And then jumping down to number 7, exchange students are not eligible to receive a school diploma. It had said, but may be awarded an honorary diploma or certificate of attendance. We have done that in the past, but we did add language stating that all exchange students would be enrolled as 11th grade students. The reason for that clarifying piece is with the way graduation works and commencement, graduation announcements, ordering caps and gowns, all those pieces. Once a student is deemed a senior, they get a lot of communication, automatic communication from the school, from third-party vendors, and it leads to a lot of confusion, especially for someone who's not graduating. And with them not graduating, they wouldn't be walking at commencement. So this just cleans things up for us to just clarify for the enrollment office, counselors, and everyone going into the situation that we're going to treat the student as an 11th grader because they're not graduating from Hempfield High School. There have been some other conversations. Dr. Musser came to me as a clarifying point and said, well, would this, speaking of the American experience, like Mr. Hottenstein has shared, like, would this student be allowed to go to prom? Yes, we'd certainly want to, allow that student to go to prom. I know it's a senior only prom, but that is kind of an American experience thing. But the piece that we're trying to clean up is the whole graduation piece, which is really tied to the 12th grade year. And then the other piece, students coming to us from other countries, oftentimes when they're returning to their home country, are doing another year of school in their home country before they head off to university. So it is fairly equivalent to junior year. We also have often run into situations where the student coming to us is not senior age. And in the past, we've sometimes automatically enrolled them as a senior. And then that's confusing because they wouldn't be a senior anyway, but now we're treating them like a senior and trying to get them to walk across the state. This just makes it very clear for everyone. And when our foreign exchange student agencies reach out, it's really handy for me to be able to say, look at school board policy 239. That outlines everything for you, the type of visa they need to have, when we need the information by, and right up front, here it is. Please understand, we're going to enroll them as a junior. Finally, clarifying point, in Hempfield High School, a lot of our seniors, so we have a student come in from another country and we want to involve them in our school. We want them to be a part of the school. We want them to connect with students in our school. The way Hempfield High School is set up with all of our open campus options, a lot of our seniors aren't there during various parts of the day. The population that's there for them to connect to the most are our 11th grade students. That's just something that has evolved over time. So in terms of a foreign exchange student coming in, wanting to get them connected with students that are in the school, the juniors are in the school, the seniors are often kind of coming and going. So those were a lot of the rationales behind the change to the policy.
I have a question about the prom, and I'm having trouble seeing this. It says, I think it's 6, provided that they meet the, thank you. Provided that they meet the criteria.
Eligibility
criteria, which they would not. So does that need to be changed in some way to ensure that somehow the whole idea of them getting to go to the prom doesn't get lost?
I don't think number 6 was specifically, thinking about prom. I mean, that's in general statement talking about, we want them to participate in our sports, in our plays, in our band, all those extracurricular kind of things. So, I mean, if you'd like us to add language on number 6 to specifically carve out the prom, I'm sure we could do that. If there's another way, language-wise, you'd like to handle that, Mr. Keener, we could.
Does anyone else have any comments about policy 239?
Concerning number 6, eligibility criteria would mean grades, discipline. Is that what that is focused on?
Yep,
Okay.
same eligibility any other Hempfield High School student
Okay.
would need to participate in our types of things. To Ms. Johnston's point, you're right. It's a senior prom. So, typically you need to be a senior to go to the senior prom. If that's something we're, all in agreement, we're kind of carving out, we can, add that if we wanted, or if there's another way we'd like to address the language, we could do that too.
I don't know. I just know how things can become lost. Or people who are sticklers will know it doesn't say that and they're juniors, and
Sure.
just to avoid that.
Would it be beneficial under number 7 to perhaps just say, for record keeping purposes only, all students will be enrolled as 11th grade students?
That would certainly work. What I'm hearing is that everyone is in broad agreement with Dr. Grossman's request, but we just want to make sure that the social aspects of high school aren't inadvertently compromised because of this somewhat arbitrary classification here. So we can either wordsmith it now, or we can pull this and ask Dr. Boschman to bring it back next month with a couple of exceptions baked in. How much urgency is there on
We
this?
can do it next month.
Is that okay with everyone?
And so
All
I'm
right.
hearing the board correctly. Prom's a big one, right? Prom, okay.
Is there anything else that's
that-
like specific?
That's, everything else is pretty much tied to graduation.
Mhm.
So I would say no.
The only question that I would have, and this may be, I don't remember what everyone's thoughts are. To what degree, if at all, is it appropriate for an exchange student to participate? And I'm deliberately vague about how I use that word in our various commencement activities. In the past, I know that some of them have walked in a cap and gown. There's been other forms of recognition. Clearly, they don't get a Hempfield diploma. But do we want them to get some sort of recognition as part of that? We don't need to answer that question right now, but if that's something that the board feels should be the case, then it needs to be baked into this policy in some way.
I can share, Mr. Keener, that often the exchange agencies they're working with come, they have a certificate, they present, I present, there's pictures taken. But that's aside from one of our large ceremonies.
Mr. Waldman?
I'm not opposed to the concept, but I think baking that into the policy, to use your words, is too granular.
Real quick, do you have something?
Mr. Wagner, then Mrs. Brady.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Keene. So perhaps a dumb question, and forgive me, why wouldn't we allow them to have receive a Hempfield diploma? Why wouldn't we let them? If Richard Garber moves in from Phoenix, Arizona, and now attends Hempfield, doesn't he get the same things that the students at Hempfield? I mean, and I'm asking my conspicuous lack of knowledge on this.
As a foreign exchange student, they're here on a visa and
Okay.
they're returning to their home country to complete their education.
Got it. Okay. So
As opposed to someone who moves in and we're intending to graduate, who moves in from Arizona,
Yeah.
has done 3 years of high school in Arizona, and now they're intending to complete their education with us.
got it. So it's really a matter of where they're completing their education. So if they were completing their education here and they were good, and now they're eligible for university back home, that's a different story, but that's not the case here.
That's not typically how the foreign exchange agencies run
Got it.
their programs.
Good enough. Thanks.
Often,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
They probably don't have the
Mrs.
same.
Brady and then.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just to clarify, because I thought in my memory that we did have kids walking at graduation, but are you saying they don't walk anymore, or they will not walk anymore, or?
In this case, they would not,
Okay.
and that's part of the confusion we're trying to clean up.
In order that they don't?
Correct.
Okay, and so your preference is that they would not walk?
That would be my preference. Again, there's lots of communication around graduation with graduation, ordering caps and gowns, all these other pieces. And can be confusing about who's walking, who's not walking, who's graduating, who's not graduating. And we're trying to get everyone on the same page and just have everyone know upfront, you're going to be enrolled as an 11th grader. You're going to have the full Hempfield High School experience. You can participate in all the things, but you're just not really graduating.
Okay.
Mrs. Johnson?
I was just going to say, often kids do have to go back and actually graduate from their home country's high school or equivalent before they go to university. That's been my experience in working with international students internationally. So it's not like they're deprived of a
Right, yeah.
graduation opportunity.
No, I just wanted
yeah.
clarification of where we were aiming.
Maybe just as long as there's still recognition and maybe invite to graduation, maybe they may not be walking, because I didn't know that was the practice in previous years, but just that they are able to attend graduation and have a ticket if they want, to be involved in that way, but maybe not officially walking like a senior, just to kind of keep those things that they may have been involved in the past.
My thought is, they've not completed our graduation requirements. They're not graduating. So, but at the same time, they've been part of our community for 6 months or for a year. They come here because they want the full American high school experience, part of which is the commencement ceremony. I would like ideally to find a way to recognize them, but that does not create administrative headaches for the administration. So I'm not suggesting they obviously don't get a diploma because they haven't completed our requirements. Whether they should walk or not, I don't know. But I would like to find some way that they be recognized as part of the cohort that they've been immersed in for the year.
Except
How
the
that happens,
cohort
I don't
is-
know, is something that we should be trying to figure out in the middle of a meeting, but
The cohort is the junior class, not
Yeah.
the senior class in this case. And I can see administratively, trying to keep up with, I don't know how many kids there are, 5 kids, and you have to remember, they're gonna have plenty of experiences, sports, choral, music, arts. They're gonna have a great time.
They are, they
So,
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll adjust some of the language as you requested and bring something back next month.
thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. And we know that you have back to school night this evening.
We do.
So
Yep, super excited about it.
thank you for breaking away to come talk with us. All right, next, policy 715, the drone / unmanned aerial vehicle policy. There are some significant revisions to that. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Hall. Or Mr. Graham, my apologies.
The request was made that we take another look at the drone policy, particularly as we get into some other planning with facilities, grounds and things. Drones are very, very common in the surveying field and planning, and the previous policy was very focused around educational use only. And so the edits in this policy are really designed to allow the superintendent to authorize, I would say, operational use of drones by contractors or the district when necessary. If it's deemed needed by the district, it is not opening the doors for anyone to come onto the property and fly things, anything they want to. It's basically still requiring all of the same certifications and things that the previous policy did. It's just allowing us to grant access to other contractors and things like that for official purposes.
Any questions or comments on the proposed revisions? All right, pursuant to the amended agenda, this is a special voting item to move it to first reading. Is there a motion to move policy 715 to first reading? Motion by Mr. Donato,
Second.
second by Mrs. Brady. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. That concludes the first portion of tonight's policy committee meeting. I will now turn it over to Mr. Johnson for education and programs.
Thank you, Mr. Keener. Let's go first to, where is he?
We're gonna
Oh,
start
you're
with
right
the,
there.
I know, I moved on you, sorry. We're gonna start with the discussion about the curriculum cycle, the structure, and how books and courses come to ed programs. So we're gonna invite Mr. Hoffman and Ms. Dicely forward. While they are coming forward, Mr. Graham, if you want to go to the first slide there. Yep, thanks. So as you know, because we've brought it to the committee here, we have a 6-year, very structured curriculum cycle plan that Mr. Hoffman and Ms. Dicely manage. And it really dictates how courses are evaluated, how we move through our curriculum writing, and when it is time to review those materials. Sometimes those cycles get adjusted either by external factors like the state changing standards. Sometimes it's internal factors. Maybe we extend a pilot, things like that. So there were some questions over the past year about when are adjustments to that curriculum cycle made? When do new courses come to this committee for review? When do books come to this committee for for review? And do you have enough time to review them and the materials you really need to make those decisions before you vote at the board meeting? So with those questions in mind, we asked Mr. Hoffman and Ms. Dicely to discuss the cycle and talk a little bit about those questions.
All right, so the next slide has a copy of the cycle. You have a handout at your seats as well, just because this gets really tiny. So the first thing we wanted to share was that when Mrs. Dicely and I started, we intentionally designed this for a couple of different reasons. And so courses were put in different spots, both for instructional curriculum and financial reasons. So the first thing we did was we looked vertically across grade levels K to 12. So we wanted to make sure that we had like math K to 6 one year, followed by 7 to 12 the next year. So that process could flow up through the grade levels. We also looked within grade level bands as well. At the elementary level specifically, I can't ask elementary teachers to have a new ELA program and a new science program in the same year. They all teach all those subjects, and that's not manageable. Then we also looked to spread out the financial impact. We looked at which content areas tended to have the largest purchase amounts for curriculum and tried to spread those out over the 6 years of the cycle. So there was very intentional planning that went into placing each subject where it fit within that cycle itself.
Well, Dr. Dandridge mentioned at the beginning, we set this up as a best case scenario, and we try our best to follow this. However, there are always things that come into play that keep us from being able to stick to this. For example, just this year, the state approved the Family and Consumer Science standards and the personal finance standards. And so the business department is not in a writing year, and yet we need to have the PFL standards in place for the 26-27 school year. So therefore, we have to go back and review our curriculum and make sure that it incorporates the PFL standards. And so that's something that we would do out of this cycle because we've never had personal financial literacy standards. We've only used the business department standards in the past. Likewise, the Family and Consumer Science is not in their writing year, and yet their standards were just redone by the state for the first time in about 20 years. It's not like those are done very often by the state, as Mrs. Brady probably knows quite well. And so since those standards just came out again, that's an area that we're going to have to look at outside of the normal curriculum cycle. And as Jason and I have talked to you over the last couple years, we've been working on the new STEELS standards, the science and technology education standards that impact 2 departments as well. And I feel like we've been writing science curriculum every single year. It doesn't seem to matter because those changes are so significant that we're doing a significant amount of work in those subjects. So those are examples that are out of our control from the state. Likewise, we have some large departments with a lot of classes. So for instance, when the English department went through and they were in their writing year, we were able to get all of the core classes written, but we couldn't get every elective written as well in the same year. And we ran into the same thing in social studies because we have a limited amount of teachers and time to get that work done. So we just got all of the core social studies curriculum rewritten, but now we're working through our AP classes and our electives in the social studies curriculum. So there are times where the amount of courses that we have to do and the number of teachers available to do that curricular work, it's just not feasible. On the limited in-service time that we have, the extra pay that we provide for them, we just have to, at times, go outside of our boundaries a little bit.
So 6 years allows us to work through the whole process. There were some questions about cost expenditures. You know, we have a new math program, we have a new ELA at the elementary level. What happens in 6 years? Those packages are all consumable. So books at the elementary level, we buy 6 years worth of books. So when we go back and start over again, that will require another purchase of those materials. So, you know, in looking at how this structure continues to move forward into the future, every 6 years, we will be making purchases of those materials at the elementary level because all the books are consumable. Off to the side, you see what happens in each of those 6 years. On the back of your curriculum cycle, you can see a detailed list of the activities that our staff are engaged with during each of those years. So during the first year, year one, it's really a needs analysis. So we take a look at how things are currently going. We look at data, and make sure that curriculum is aligned to state standards, eligible content. We go through and look at the courses that are being offered, and look at, do we need to propose changes to those courses that are happening at the secondary level? We look at our current assessments, see if they're working for us. Oftentimes, our departments will visit other districts, both at the elementary and secondary level, to talk to their teachers about what they're doing. We look at any PD needs that we have for professional development, and then we start looking at if we need to investigate new textbooks or new programs. So that first year is really a chance for us to take a step back and say, is this working? If it's not working, what are changes that we need to put in place to make things better?
Then as we move through the different years, the second year, year two, we're evaluating and actually writing the curriculum and assessments, which then gets put into place in year three. So year three is that purchase year when we're actually buying whatever new textbooks or programs or things that we would need. And then years 4, 5, and 6 are the years where, okay, we're already doing this, but what do we need to do to make it better? And we're just constantly evaluating, monitor, and adjusting through years 4, 5, and 6. So what does all that mean in the timeline of when I bring things to the board or when Jason is bringing new things? In general, if we would break that down into what would typically happen, anything that I want to have approved for the following school year has to be approved or has to be brought to this committee in October for it to be voted on no later than November, because I'm working on the course guide in November and December, in order for it to be ready for course selection in January for the following school year. So sometimes it seems like, why am I bringing something in October that we're not going, like if I brought something in October of this past year, it would not go into effect for over a year, because it takes that long to get everything through, because our course selection process starts in January at the secondary level. So anything in middle school and high school, we would have to know that far ahead of time in order to get it approved and into the course guide for the following school year. Things are a little different at the elementary level because they're not dealing with course selection, but they're still having to get things approved far enough in advance for us to deal with budgeting and ordering. So that's the other piece that comes into place. And so when I bring a new course to get the course approved, then we're searching for the right materials and textbooks to use within that course. And then I bring those to you in the timeline that makes sense for our ordering process.
That's sort of further described that on the next slide. So this looks at the book and program approval. So once Mrs. Dicey gets that course approved in the fall, then that allows her teachers to start working on it. What we don't want to do is have them work on writing curriculum, selecting a book, bring the book and the course at the same time, and the board decide we don't want that course. Then that time has been wasted. So that's why the course always comes first. After the course is approved, as Mrs. Dicey said, they start working on the books and programs. So those will be brought to you March or April or earlier, like she's bringing some books tonight because we have those ready for you. For me at the elementary level, because we typically have a pilot of programs that we're running through to get as much experience with as we can. I often bring those to you in the April timeframe for approval. Once we have approval for the books, then we work on having the teachers begin to write curriculum from April through August. We make sure that any professional development that's needed is put into place. We get those books ordered. And then by the time we come back in August, we have curriculum complete and things ready to go for that school year. So it does take a long time to work through that process, but that allows us to make sure that we are having the highest quality curriculum we can, having the PD in place so that teachers feel comfortable, and making sure that by the time school starts in August, we're set and ready to roll.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
You had mentioned in this process, I guess, burden or the time that the teachers have to be involved in, writing the curriculum, and that it takes a lot of their time and it takes away from professional development, et cetera. What is the point when there's so many courses that it takes up so much of the teacher's time to develop the curriculum and to prepare that course, that it's a loss? Do you understand what I'm asking? That it's a loss where it's too much of a burden for the teachers to prepare this curriculum, to get the new program in place. And it takes away from their professional development, any in-service. It sounded like there's a tension there. So is there a point where there's too many courses? I mean, we want to have a robust program, don't get me wrong, but is there a point where it's like, wow, maybe this is too much of a burden on our teachers to do this curriculum development or to add yet another course?
I would say the majority and almost all of the work that we're doing are rewriting existing courses. And when Jason and I took over this job 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I guess, that we started in these roles, we revamped the entire way our curriculum is written, because it used to be written in Word documents, and each document was each piece of the curriculum was a different document. So when I came in and wanted to look at English curriculum, I literally might have to open 48 different documents, right?
Right.
So we have redone this and are using Google Docs because there's new technology that we can use that we couldn't use. We're linking assessments into the documents instead of just having them as separate documents as well. So some of the work that's happening now is the revamping into the new system to make it better and more usable and a true living curricular document for our teachers. So that's just taking some time. I don't see us at the end of our 6-year cycle changing that system, which means that the burden, once we've gotten into this new formatting, won't be there anymore. And then it will really be a lot of the evaluate, monitor, revise the assessments, revise to make it better, but the foundation will already be there.
Obviously, I don't know all the details, but I know you've talked about this through the years. So what I think you were saying was we've almost got everything into this new system, but not yet, even though we've been working on it for 5 years.
Well, 4 years, because the first year was Jason and I trying to make sense of what's
Figure
here.
it out.
Exactly.
Okay,
So we are getting much closer to that point.
so when you add a totally new class, like the medical one, it's easier you've got the formatting and you just put that in, so it's not like you're
It's-
just going through and updating.
Correct. Plus the teachers, the more that they use the system, the more comfortable they are with it, and therefore the writing goes faster.
Okay. I just want to make sure, see what that tension is. Is there something that needs to be done to relieve any of that tension? Because we know that our teachers have a lot that they have to do.
No,
And,
I'll just add too, like at the secondary level and meeting with the coordinators, like all of the new courses that come are courses that teachers want to add.
Mhm,
Now, certainly all of their wishes and desires don't turn into courses, but
mhm.
everything that's being brought is something that teachers are wanting to teach because of student needs, student requests. So,
Something that was identified in that need analysis process.
And I appreciate that. I'm also work balance,
mhm.
time in the classroom, preparation for what you're already teaching, all of that, to watch that balance and that tension between all of that that's going on. And knowing that we want to offer so many courses because there's so many great things out there to learn, but there is a limit as well, even though, well, I would love to have XYZ, but maybe that's not.
Certainly. And we
the best
balance that,
use of our resources.
right, we balance that in the whole process.
Mhm.
When we have ideas for new courses, what's going away for instance, like tonight, I'm talking about a new exercise science book, but that's replacing a different class that we used to have. So instead of rewriting the old curriculum, we're writing new curriculum for exercise science instead of our sports medicine class. So most of the time where there's something's going away when something else is being added.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Yeah, I have a kind of a related question. I don't have any questions about your presentation, but do you have a financial plan that coincides with this curriculum cycle? And if you don't, is that something that would make sense to create?
Go ahead.
So as Jason said from the very beginning, the way that we divided out the courses is intentional so that we're not purchasing an ELA program for the elementary at the same year that we're doing a math program. So we are always we have it laid out in a way that we think is the best fiscal decision so that we aren't going to Mrs. Hall and saying, Mrs. Hall, this year we need some crazy amount of numbers so that it stays relatively consistent from year to year when we're proposing our budgets.
Yeah, I understand that generally. I guess I'm asking for, is there a way that we can get more detail on the financial plan and the financial impact of the curricular cycle year to year in advance of making decisions that year? Because when I look at this presentation, I'll be honest, I don't have any idea what the cost would be for this year. I see 3 green boxes, next year 4 green boxes, and I'm looking at green boxes saying, I don't know what that translates to in green money.
Yeah, and some of that is unknown, just because we don't know necessarily what the costs of programs are going to be multiple years out. What we did do when we created this process was we tried to structure, for example, an elementary ELA program is going to be one of the most expensive things. So pairing that with other subject areas that cost less. When we submit our curriculum budget, we have a limit that we stay within. So we have to make sure that whatever we're proposing fits within that limit. But to give you a definitive figure, we don't necessarily have those in advance. We know what our end goal needs to be, and then we structure it to make sure we fit within that.
I guess maybe I'm asking, is there a way to have that and get that in advance as you're working ahead on some of these things to be able to have more detail around that actual number? I'm not expecting a perfect number, but something around a financial plan that gives us an idea when we're approving certain things, what is that financial impact?
So when we do our budget, because we do our budgets in November usually for the following year, like the textbooks that I'm bringing to you tonight, I didn't know which books they were going to be, but I knew which subjects were going to need books. And so I was able to put a placeholder in of we're likely going to need $4,000 for this class. And so it's all like everything I'm bringing tonight was already in the budget that I shared with in November. So that's kind of the best that I can do because it takes time. And I think Jason would say the same, like he recently shared science programs at the elementary school. We don't know exactly which one we're going to use, but we put a placeholder in our budget for that science program.
At what point in the process, maybe I'll ask this a different way, do you know what that cost is going to be?
Typically, in order to put those budget requests in November, we get a quote, and that quote is typically good for 60 to 90 days. So we kind of have an estimate of what it will look like, but by the time we get to July 1 and can order that and have a solid quote, there can be some variance within that. So we have the best numbers that we can in November when we submit our budget, but until we get that final quote for when we come to the board and say, this is the cost, there is some variation that does take place.
You
I mean,
said,
oh, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
you said
just along with Justice said, you said you have some kind of limits that you have. Maybe you could share those with us. That's, you can't go over that number then, right?
Right, like when we put our budgets together, we're asked, like Mrs. Hall, Mr. Mamirski asked us to stay, this year we were told to limit our budgets to the numbers that we had last year.
I think that when you look at the schedule, it looks like we're supposed to approve stuff before we know the price of stuff. Like if you look October, you present the stuff for programs, and then November, we're supposed to approve it, but we don't have a budgetary number. So it's kind of almost reverse of how it feels like it needs to be, because we're approving stuff without an unknown number.
When I do a new course proposal, I include within the new course proposal an estimate for the materials that would
But-
be part of it.
Yeah, it just, we're approving stuff, but there again, it's an overall budget. We don't know what the allotment is, and I agree with Mr. Walker with it. It seems a little bit backwards for the way my brain works.
Could I I used to order materials for school. I knew on average how much a high school textbook cost, and I knew on average what it would cost for the English classes, for example, in the elementary. Those were my budget estimates.
Correct.
So, and I mentioned to you tonight, I was surprised to see that the hardback books for the high school that cost is held pretty solid for over 10 years, probably, maybe even 20. They cost as much as college books did when I went to college. So, so that's the only way you can really plan it. I know it sounds backwards, but but it's not. I mean, that's just the way you have to do it. Is take those average numbers and make an estimate and then pull that up. And then I would assume, say, if you're looking at the ELA programs, you look at several and it's like, oh, okay, those are 50,000, 20,000, 70,000. You kind of come up with an average number, and that's how you plan.
Right.
And I know that sounds crazy, but that's just kind of how it works.
I think from what I'm hearing you say, you come to us with October, teacher wants to work for high school, wants to do another course. You come to us with October, you look and get generally, we're gonna need this many books or whatever the materials are. That's gonna cost $5,000, which we see. We approve the course, and then we're seeing the results of that. They go through the textbook selection process. They don't.
Which they're not going to
Which-
go through
which-
all that work until they know
Well,
whether
yeah,
or not
I
the
was
class
gonna
is
say
going
that
to.
without approving the course, I wouldn't, that would be like saying, why.
Correct. And sometimes like the textbooks, I think two that I'm bringing tonight are replacement textbooks and courses that we already have. So they're not new textbooks. It's just that the textbooks are too old to be used anymore.
Other question I have is, I know science, we're writing the curriculum, but that was sort of thrown upon us by the state. How often does the state massively revise their curriculum like they did with science? And I guess I think you answered this when we selected both the math and the ELA series, but for both of those series, since I guess we're in the third year now of math and the first year of the ELA series, but let's say the state next year decides to totally revise the math curriculum, will the textbook company match up to whatever? And then same question with ELA.
There's no way to answer that question. The state typically does not rewrite their standards that frequently, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that's
FDF
I
was over
couldn't
20
for
years.
myself.
The current science standards were 2001, so that's 24 years. So it's not
not
a
a
frequent
big-
process.
Okay.
And, would what we currently have match up? Who knows? In most cases, there may be one or two
I mean,
things
if
you
they
would have to
tweak
supplement and
something, yeah.
tweak. But for the large part, Yes, it would.
I mean, the science one sounds like a massive,
Science is
Massive.
massive.
massive change from even what I remember from
Right.
for elementary.
I will say that working on the standards at the state level is a multi-year process, so we always know it's coming and we can, like, we started working with the science standards in draft form before they were actually approved because we knew it was coming. We didn't have the right numbers yet. We weren't sure if the language was final, but we had a heads up. With our family and consumer science standards, actually, our department coordinator, Lauren Stauffer, served on the state committee. So she was very involved in what was going on. And so again, we knew about that. We just got notification, I don't know, about 2 months ago that the health and physical education standards are going to be revised. And those again are like over 20 years old. They'll start working on that and it'll be a multi-year process. And we have one of our teachers who applied to be part of that process. And so that we're hoping that that teacher is able to be engaged in that. And our teachers, when they do that on their own time. It's not usually during school. Lauren did several summer workshops that she was in Harrisburg and Philadelphia, and she was just doing those because she was vested in the process. So whenever we have that happening, that is really nice too. The art standard, I should say the arts, because the standards for music and art and the it's like dance arts, they're all embedded into one group. And those also, we just got notification that those standards are going to be looked at again. And we have an art teacher from the middle school who's interested in being on that committee and has applied to be on that committee. So it's wonderful when Hempfield has that representation as well, but it is about a 3-year process or so. So we usually know, we get a heads up. It's not just a sudden, oh, the math standards are new. So we would have time to be able to be looking at them, evaluating them, getting a sense of how different they are from what we're actually doing to be able to make good plans.
I have just one question, and it's simply that, a question. The first 3 years of the cycle, the needs analysis, we evaluate materials, write curriculum assessments, purchase and implement. Is there a way to condense that somewhat? I understand, Mrs. Dicey, you made the point that you have to pick a text, you have to get board approval, then pick a textbook, but it seems like 3 years of planning for 3 years of execution is a little bit skewed, but maybe it's not. I guess I'm just asking, the question is, would there be a way to do some of these things in parallel with one another to make the planning part shorter so that the implementation part can be longer?
The curriculum is still being implemented in those other 2 years, so we're teaching that curriculum while we're evaluating it, doing the needs analysis. So we get 6 full years out of it. It's just that needs analysis occurs so that we can get ready to begin to work on those changes at the same time that we're continuing to teach that program.
Like included in this with the elementary math and reading programs were full year pilots. Like I can't speed that up any further than what we often do. And it takes time. Like in the needs analysis, Jason mentioned that sometimes we have teachers going out and seeing things in other schools. So coming up in March, some of our science teachers on an early dismissal day, so they're not missing any student time, but on an early dismissal day are going to visit 3 different school districts to see the science standards in action and to see spaces as well because of looking at the construction of the new high school as well. So they're looking, it takes time to fit those in. We only have certain days where that's even possible for them to go do that. Another school would be in session on those days. So each piece of this process takes time.
And honestly, if we had a shorter cycle, like if it was only 4 years, that would mean teachers were making changes more frequently and having turnover with perhaps new things more frequently. So this gives us more time to fine tune than if the cycle was shorter. The other piece, like I mentioned, most of if we're buying online access or buying a program that has consumables, 6 years tends to be the maximum that we can do. But when we do those 6-year purchases, at least with the ones that we've done recently, it's almost like we get 2 or 3 years worth of materials for free. So the longer that we can make a commitment to the publisher to say, we will use your materials for this length of time, the cost is dramatically less. So
No,
that
and I guess
6-year
that's
cycle
one thing I'm
benefits us.
getting at, Mr. Hoffman, is if we could condense the planning part into 2 years, that gives us, and then maybe have another, I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about this I'm just asking the question.
Yeah.
See if we can find more efficiencies.
So there are things that are happening in those 6 years where we're looking at the curriculum, but we're still teaching that program and that curriculum for those full 6 years.
So I'll ask a question that's, I think, along the same lines, and it'll also show my lack of knowledge too, but why is 6 years, just for my own edification, why is that the sweet spot? So, I mean, and why is it the same for all grade or for all subjects, right? So if I think about like the periodic table in science, it's been around since forever, right? I mean, or I think about like I work in the eye care business, like the Snellen chart was invented like 1882, right? We still use it today, the eye chart, right? So some things would absolutely need to be revisited, evaluated, acted on faster than others. But 3 + 4 has been 7 since like that, 200 AD. You know what I mean? Like or BC.
Facts and how they're taught are two different.
That's what I guess that's what I'm
Those
asking.
are
Like,
two different
like the
things.
science
We're
of
talking about
reading
numbers.
has continued to evolve, right? That's different than something that's been static for decades.
Right.
So why is 6 years the sweet spot across the board for all subjects?
Well, in order to keep everything moving, we need to have the same cycle for all subject areas. But just because something is coming up in year 3 for purchase implement, it doesn't mean that it has to change. It just means we've looked at it and we've determined everything's fine as it is. We don't need a new textbook. We don't need to make any changes. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. Maybe it's, there are 3 units where we have to tweak the assessment because it's not giving us the information we want. We'll make those assessment changes and we'll be good to go, call it a day, and CP chemistry is good to go.
No.
On
Right.
the other hand, it could be, the FCS standards have totally changed. We need to make some changes and readdress a lot of our courses. Then that's a bigger.
That makes sense. Yeah, appreciate the answer.
Yeah, so it's not every subject has to go through huge changes each time.
That's what I want to make sure of. Like, hey, it's 6 years. Let's go buy some more textbooks for chemistry, right?
I think it's
part
kind of
of-
like a home maintenance schedule. It's like you put things on a schedule to check up on them. And if you look at it and you're like, oh, whoa, we really need to address this water heater, then you deal with it in that year, but it's on the cycle. And if it's not, you're all good. Okay, great. We can put our attention on some other things.
And
So does that mean that some courses that may not change every 6 years, we can reuse textbooks?
absolutely. In
Does
fact,
does
two
that
of-
happen very often?
yes, 2 of the
Okay.
textbooks that I'm bringing you tonight are 10 years old and we need to replace because the AP requires them to be within 10 years for copyright date. So so they were not purchased in their purchase cycle year because we didn't need them at that point. But now they're out of print and I can't even buy anymore. I had to buy used environmental science books last year to have like a Band-Aid to get through another year before we did the full purchase. So absolutely, there are times, especially at the secondary level, as Mr. Hoffman said, at the elementary, they were using a lot more consumables. And so those are purchased in the 6-year cycles. But at the secondary level, we're not purchasing textbooks necessarily every 6 years.
The only non-consumable textbook at the elementary level is the 4th grade Pennsylvania textbook. The governor's picture in the textbook is Tom Ridge. So, but Pennsylvania history and geography hasn't really changed and government hasn't changed. So we haven't bought a new Pennsylvania textbook because we didn't need one.
Right. And
So-
even as you mentioned, the periodic table, Mr. Wagner, all the work that we're doing in science at the high school is primarily our biology class and our 9th grade general science class, because our chemistry and physics classes don't need significant changes.
As a history teacher, I would probably say, most of you would say, oh, you don't need books. And I would say, well, you're wrong. Because history goes on, and there's nothing like trying to teach current events in a book that ends in 1960. So,
Yeah, I pulled out textbook literature anthologies the other day that are at the high school that we read some short stories out of or some poetry out of. They're from the 1990s. They're not what we use for everything, but some of the stories and poetry and Macbeth hasn't changed, and so we have those anthologies haven't changed, and we have not replaced those for all those years.
any more questions about this part of their presentation? Let's go to the next section then. The curriculum textbook approval.
Yeah, there's a separate presentation. You divided the presentation. That is a separate presentation.
Second one. Just pick the first one.
Say the first one.
I don't know why it got duplicated.
You can go to the next one. So I do have 4 textbooks to bring to you tonight. The first one is the Introduction to Exercise Science. This is for our new college and the high school Introduction to Exercise Science class, which you did approve this past year. It is replacing our sports medicine class. Honestly, if we kept our sports medicine class, I would need a new book for sports medicine because again, that's something that would have been really outdated. This is the textbook that is required by HAC, so we don't really have choices in this text. It is a college level text because it's a college in the high school class. The next text.
I guess, Mrs. Dykely, that raised an interesting question. This is a dual enrollment class. Do we even have, why do we need to even approve that textbook? Because it's not our class. We're essentially just giving transfer credit for it. So as a matter of a point of order, do we even really need to approve a textbook that's not being taught by our faculty, that's being taught by someone else's faculty as part of dual
So
enrollment?
this is a college in the high school class, which means it is taught by our teachers, but we're following the curriculum that's provided by the university.
Okay, all right.
So, and oftentimes, just like college professors are often given choices, some of the CHS classes, they might say, here are 3 different books that you can
Gotcha.
use. This one happens to be one where this is the book that they use. It's my understanding from Dr. Mackey, who will be teaching this class, this is the book that every college uses for their freshman class in exercise science.
Okay, I'm just trying to save us all some time.
Oh,
here,
that would
but
be
makes
lovely.
perfect sense.
Be all about less paperwork for that. The next one is environmental science course. Again, this is the one that I told you our current book is will be over 10 years old. AP requires for environmental science, for biology, for some specific classes that those are within 10-year copyright. Our old book is out of print. I can't get those anymore, even if the college board would accept it at this point. So this is the new environmental book. It is aligned to the AP classroom, made specifically for an AP course. The math and dosage for healthcare professionals is for a class that we're going to offer for the first time this next year. I brought this class to the board probably 2 or 3 years ago when math was in the needs analysis and we were looking big picture at math. And we made some significant changes to math curriculum and to the order of classes at the high school, because what we were finding were students who were not college bound didn't necessarily have a lot of choices for their classes. So we have switched the order of Algebra 2 and Geometry for our college prep and below levels so that when they get to Algebra 2, they would have choices in what classes that they're taking. We proposed 2 classes at that time. We'll be ready to offer one next year, which is our Math for Medical Careers. And this is the textbook that we'd like to use with that new class, although like I said, it was approved a couple years ago. Our hope is that the following school year, we will have the Math for Trades class ready to go. And then we'll see if there's actually a textbook that we'll use for that or whether that will just be a teacher created. But that's where this is coming from. It's taken us a couple years to get to a place in the math department where the sequence has changed because we had to once we approve the change of the sequence, this is the first year that our students have switched the order of Algebra 2 and Geometry, so that now next year, instead of Algebra 2, they would have this class as a choice. The following year, they would have 2, which means we offer less sections of Algebra 2 at the lower levels in order to allow people to teach these classes. And then the last book is comparative government. Again, one of our AP classes that is a way for students to earn their 4th credit of social studies. Students have multiple classes that they can choose. AP comparative government is one of those that they can choose. And this book as well was about 10 years out of date. And for a class like this, which isn't necessarily history, but more modern comparative government, it was necessary to update that book as well. And again, that's a book that is aligned to the AP. It's the same publisher that we use for several of our AP classes, specifically aligned to everything that the College Board provides. That's it.
Questions? All right, turn it to you, and you're gonna do the calendar and the professional development.
And I'll leave these on display, and then they would be voted upon and put on the agenda at the next board meeting.
Board meeting, and they will be on display here. All right, our final presentation this evening is a presentation on our professional development plans. As you are aware, we are currently finalizing our comprehensive plan, the 2025-2028 comprehensive plan. Professional development plan is a portion of that plan, 3-year plan. So we just wanted to make sure to give an overview of all the items that are associated with that plan and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. Our current comp plan is on display for the next 30 days. The professional development plan is a portion of that. It's aligned based on the needs review that we've done on student performance data. And for that plan, we identified 2 action steps. The first one was to provide professional development, build knowledge of best practices in specific disciplines, and reflect on pedagogy. And the second action step was to provide professional development opportunities for staff with current social and emotional health concerns, recognizing warning signs or symptoms, and implementing school supports to address concerns. So those are kind of the hierarchy big buckets that we put our professional development in. Then the strategies that we are using to work on those action plans. I talked to you a little bit earlier about this is the first year that we are implementing a new professional learning plan, a PLP, with our staff. So they're in the first year of taking workshops. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. What that looks like for our staff. Obviously, we've been implementing a new K-60 curriculum, as well as some new secondary curriculum. We are continuing to evaluate our PIS, but I know you love our acronym, so it's the Positive Behavior Interventions and Support Systems that are found in many of our schools, almost all of our schools in one form or another. Some other areas that we're looking at is improving attendance rates and reducing discipline infractions or reoffenses. We do have a professional development committee who works on all of these items. What's that?
Hey, Doug,
Thanks.
question is, is the anti-bullying thing that Mr. Bomersky's starting, is that gonna be in here?
I'll show you where it is in
Okay,
here,
all
Mr.
right.
Maris. I knew you would be
Jump ahead, sorry.
anxious to see that. We do have a professional development committee. Also, this is defined in our collective bargaining agreement. The executive committee is Mrs. Crush, myself, Mrs. Dicely, Ms. Maria, and Mr. Hoffman. So we serve as the executive committee. Along with us, we have 12 HEA representatives representing all the schools. We have district principals, department coordinators, and supervisors that also are part of that committee. The full committee meets twice a year. The executive committee meets multiple times throughout the year for planning. They have a couple of primary functions. One of them is to survey the staff to help identify what the professional development needs of the district are, and also to provide input on the professional development calendar and reflect on the experiences that we have provided throughout the year and give us areas of improvement. All right, so the professional learning plan, the PLP, as I said, it's a new 3-year plan. We rolled it out this year. All of our staff are required to take all the workshops that you see on the screen in front of you. It is a combination of some state mandates. So the PDE does require that we train all of our staff in structured literacy, depending on their certification. All of our staff on ethics. At the time that we developed the PLP, there was something called culturally relevant sustaining education, which is now called Common Ground, and is now no longer a requirement. So we may move that to an extension workshop to allow room for some other things. But that is one of the state mandates that was part of this plan, as well as safety, security, trauma-informed instruction. Those are all coming from the state. We must provide that for our staff. Beyond that, we felt it was important, especially to work and look at our special ed and English learners. So we have a workshop on accommodations and modifications, one kind of on the basics of special ed and one on the basics of English language learners. We have a couple technology courses that our staff are going through. One's on universal access, one's on data security. We have a classroom management and behavior interventions course workshop that our teachers are taking. Mr. Maris, there's your bullying and cyberbullying. So that's the work that we've been doing with McGrath in order to provide that training for all of our staff. We have spent this year working with our administration and training them and making sure all of our worksheets and forms are consistent. And then the plan is to move that to the staff moving into the second and third year of this plan. We also have a workshop on copyright and fair use. So those are the required workshops. We have 2 large in-service days a year where we provide choice menus for our staff. They can go through each of these, or some version of an 1.5-hour workshop. Some of them we have to offer multiple, like the structured literacy gets 4 1.5-hour workshops in order to get all that training in. And then throughout the course of the 3 years, they must have all of these workshops completed to have their PLP done. So they, at the end of the year, when they have their evaluations with their principals, they'll review which workshops they took this past year. They have a form where they can reflect on the learning and how they can apply that to the classroom. Beyond that, we do provide several different extension topics. We are currently in planning for our March in-service day. And we're well over, I believe, 80 offerings for our staff at this point. So beyond just the ones you see on the screen, we are offering a lot of other opportunities. But these are the required elements that we know everyone's going to have a consistent experience with throughout the course of the 3 years. Beyond the PLP, we also have our induction plan. So how we onboard our staff and make sure that they have a great introduction to the profession. We at Hempfield have a 3-year induction plan for our new teachers. Induction plan is one of the requirements for them to get their level 2 certification. Some of the elements of our plan is that they are provided a trained mentor, a colleague that is within their subject area. They go through several different required orientation activities, but it's really also a point of contact for them that's in a non-supervisory role that can help them with those informal questions that they may have and not know who to go to. In addition, in year 1 of the induction program, we do have monthly meetings for all of our new teachers. They're a combination of in-person meetings, and we also have some virtual experiences for them. They do complete 3 peer observations in the building where they can choose other master teachers in the building to go observe and pick up some best practices on, as well as having a minimum of 2 formal observations from their supervisor during that first year. They do work on a portfolio to collect artifacts of different elements of their first year teaching that they share at their end of year evaluation with their principal or supervisors. They do have regular meetings with their mentors, and there is an orientation prior to the start of the school year. I know you all are well aware of that orientation because you all come to the cookie social at the end and give them a nice welcome to the district. So we appreciate that. Year 1's the most intensive. That's where they're meeting regularly. They're doing a lot of networking. I still remember the New teachers that I went through orientation with 24 years ago, still have some great connections there that I continue to utilize even today. Year 2 of the program is not as intense. So there are just 2 evening meetings, one in the fall, one in the spring. And we are doing some of those state mandated trainings during those meetings. One of them is centered around the ethics training, and one is centered around that common ground training. They do continue to receive 2 formal observations by their supervisor in that year 2. And then year 3, no formal meetings for them, but they do have 2 formal observations. If they've completed all 3 of the years, they've gotten 6 successful evaluations from their supervisor, both mid-year and end of year, then they would then not only be able to apply for their level 2 certification, but also for tenure. That's when those names come forward to you for the approval at the board meetings.
And the induction programs.
Yeah.
Required by the state for all the teachers.
It is. So the state requires a 2-year program. We have a 3-year just because that mirrors the level 2 certification and the tenure program. But really you can see the majority of the work's happening in year 1 and in year 2.
So forgive me if I missed this somewhere. The induction plan is for new teachers, correct?
Correct.
What about a veteran teacher?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm curious as to, I look back at the workshops that they're going through, right? So whether it's ethics or it's, safety and security or cyberbullying, whatever it is, or bullying, what accountability measures are being taken, or what's happening thereafter to make sure that what's being taught in these workshops is actually being applied in the real world?
Yeah.
If any.
So 2 pieces here. First of all, the PLP applies to all of our staff, not just our new staff.
Okay.
So the induction is kind of the last piece there, which is on top of all the PLP requirements that we have. So our PLP is for all of our staff. They are all taking all of these workshops as well as other ones that they choose, which are most applicable for their profession. So that's part of it. But I think also you might be getting at veteran teachers who are coming to us who maybe didn't start with us. Beyond just the mentors, we have peer advisors, which we would assign to them to help acclimate them to Hempfield and maybe find out what we do just a little bit different from the previous districts.
I appreciate that. I still, if you don't mind, I mean, I'm still looking for, if I'm a 22-year teacher, right? And I go through these required workshops, what's happening thereafter to make sure that I'm actually applying this stuff, right? So,
So-
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So where you're moving, I believe, is the professional development is what we're offering to get those basic skills, right? And then we move into the supervision evaluation where we have our walkthroughs or we have our formal observations or our differentiated supervision process where we will be looking for those things that they learned, how they're applying them in the classroom, and then giving them feedback on, what went well, let's reinforce that, let's continue to do that. Where are some areas that we can fill some holes? Hey, here's another person in the building you might want to connect with who I see really does it well. Maybe pair you up with them to kind of do some of that knowledge sharing. So there's a lot of that that goes on. I did talk about our 2 main in-service days that we are offering our PLP workshops. Beyond that, we do have a lot of, as you know, our early dismissal time and our in-service time is filled up with department meeting time or building meeting time, where there's other initiatives that are also being offered to our staff beyond just the required.
And that's for the staff across the board, right? Not just new, not just transplants.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's everyone. Yep.
Okay.
100%.
I just want to make sure that we're doing what we need. Like, training's great,
Sure.
but when you do nothing to prepare for it and you do nothing to follow up on it, it's frankly meaningless. So I want to make sure that whatever we're doing, it's being followed through on. Like in my company, there are certain things that we are held accountable to from a federal law standpoint, from a compliance standpoint. And we're tested all the time on it to make sure that we actually are applying what we should, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I want to make sure that this is happening here too. You're saying that it is, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. That's part of our supervision evaluation plan, which is an offshoot or an extension beyond the professional development. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a system question. So if you get a 2-year teacher,
Yep.
where do they fall into our plan and how does that marry with other plans?
Are you saying?
Like a, not a new teacher, but a teacher that's on their second year of teaching forever.
Yeah, right. So if you complete a year of induction in a district, you get a year one certificate, and then they come to us with that. We would place them in year two of our induction program. If they come to us and haven't completed any induction program, we'd put them in year one, even if it's their second year of teaching. So it is incumbent on them to bring that with them from their previous district, and that's why we're real intentional about making sure they have the certifications when they complete our programs as well. But yeah, that's all part of the review when they come in and are new teachers and are being assigned mentors, things like that.
On the required workshops, are any of those computerized based or are they all live workshops?
So they're all face-to-face. They're offered for face-to-face. I will say the state mandate on the safety and security is a 3-hour training that we must offer annually. 1 hour is in person, 2 hours can be virtual. So some of those are completed with a video course, but everything else is offered face-to-face. Okay. Well, if there's no further questions, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Before I turn over the mic, I do want to let the board members know there is a draft calendar in your handouts. Mr. Mercy asked if I could hand this out. I know in March you will be voting on the calendar for next school year. Here is a draft that gives an idea of what we're looking at bringing to you in March. If you have any questions, please feel free to see any of us on it.
I guess I have a question about the draft calendar. As I'm looking at this, first, I'm glad to see that we're wrapping up the school year in May. It gives students a full 3 months, almost 2.5 months to work, to travel, whatever they need to do. The only question that I have is we're coming back for a short and probably relatively useless week after Memorial Day. Is there a way to trim a holiday here and there, maybe repurpose an in-service day so that we don't have to bring the students back after Memorial?
We have certainly tried that, and we've had that goal over the past couple of years. We have not been able to trim enough to get it in front of Memorial Day. This year, we're into June, so there was a concerted effort to at least get us to the end of May. The way the cycle falls, we're not able to go prior to Memorial Day with this draft, but I know in upcoming calendars, they're continuing to try that.
I guess my question would be, why not? I'm looking at this. Do we need to have Good Friday and Easter Monday off? Do we need to have, it seems to me that there's a couple little relatively minor tweaks that could be made here, if that's something that the board feels is a desirable outcome, and maybe it's not. I'm just thinking that I can't imagine that anything substantive is going to happen in those 3.5 days after Memorial Day.
There are a lot of celebrations and building ending, wrapping up, kind of activities that happen in the building. A lot of those are happening during those weeks. There are still some end of course exams that do happen. It's not ideal. We'd love to be out before Memorial Day. I know with this version, we tried several different drafts. We were not able to look at it. I can certainly take that feedback and see if there is an opportunity to make any additional changes before you vote on it in March. My understanding is there's not.
Well, and maybe I'm the only one who thinks this. Do other board members think that finishing before Memorial Day is a goal worth pursuing?
No.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. I hear what you're saying though, because, and I don't disagree. You're going to come back after Memorial Day, do what? Nothing. You're just you're checking a box, right? So why not? The question I have is how are you going to find 4 days? Right?
I would look at Good Friday and Easter Monday, pick one, right?
I think that there's a balance to be drawn because during the course of the year, it's good for families, but it's also good for students and for teachers as well to have some longer breaks throughout the course of the year to rest and rejuvenate. So I think packing it all in densely so that you have longer over the summer may be counterproductive because you're wearing everybody to the bone during the course of the year. So it is a trade-off. But from a teaching standpoint, I liked having those days during the year to catch my breath.
You won't like to have another week off in the summer?
From
I mean, I guess it goes both ways, right?
It definitely does.
I think a balance needs to be struck too. I think thinking of our students as well, needing breaks throughout the school year and time with their families. I also think of childcare in the summer, and a lot of childcare does not start until well into June. So that beginning of June, although some people may say, oh, it's for traveling, oh, it's for work if you're a teenager. For younger children and families with younger children, it's often trying to balance finding care for kids and moving them around in not an ideal setting. So I think we just have to look at a lot of perspectives and kind of take the approach of balancing it as best we can, because everyone's situation is different.
Also, we have a fixed calendar. It's not like working in the business world where you need a break, you take a long weekend. We're just structured differently, and as someone with a family, I like 4-day weekends periodically. And we all need that. And if I worked in the business world or in the secular world, the non-school world, if I wanted that, I'd just take that time off. But obviously, our teachers can't do that, and our administrators really can't do that. So
I don't have a preference either way, but there is a couple days you could take, the Monday after Easter and the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You got 2 days right there. And
we do.
I'd like to know what our kids think about getting off a week early, you know?
Yeah,
versus-
maybe this is something, that's a good point, Mr. Meredith. Maybe this is something.
There's
we wanna
2 days,
ask
but you gotta
the
get
student
4.
council About.
I don't think we need to ask the students.
My
what
son, who's
they-
8, will say, yes, I want to get out early, but
They
I'll
want the
say,
parties.
what are we doing? Yeah.
They
like,
want the.
Well-
parties.
Everyone's gonna say-
School's not even open yet.
But I guess my point is, do the kids accomplish much that last 4 days?
Oh,
So
I think we all know the answer to that.
No.
It's different.
Whatever
They
the
last 4 days or after Memorial Day or
Gonna have
before.
whatever the last
Day.
4 days
All those
are.
Celebrations and things are going to happen.
I don't have a strong feeling either way, but Grant's point is, I think we work pretty hard. We might be able to get 4 days.
I will say we do have to be careful about what those days are, because as you know, from a teaching perspective, you take Easter Monday away, well, you're gonna have a lot of families who are away that day. And so then I walk into a classroom that has half my class. I can't do anything that day anyway. So, you know, when you look at those, it's.
A lot of people that work in this district, their kids go to another district, and, you know, so I think it's important to align with some of our neighboring school districts. We also took this to a SPAC meeting not long ago, and the feedback that we received is that families also like to plan vacations during the school year. So I think when you take away those long weekends, it really impacts the attendance for both students and for staff.
And Mrs. Burkholder, I appreciate that. That's a choice that they're making. And if they choose to prioritize travel over academics, then that's their decision. I mean,
Always.
not to be Captain Obvious here, but let's be honest. The 18, 20 people around this table, whatever, we can go round and round about this until the year 2096 and not come to a resolution. As far as I'm concerned, stop splitting hairs. It is what it is. I'm good with it.
Yeah,
I don't-
let it go. It is what it is.
I mean, we're talking about a couple of days. Let's just move on with life. I mean, I'm with you. I get it. If you ask me, we should go all year long. That's my personal opinion.
and
But
to
you
be
know
clear,
what?
this is not an
That-
issue I feel
but
super
today ain't the
strongly
day to
about.
argue that.
It impacts me not at all. I'm just asking the question.
Doesn't sound like you have enough board members. Justin, you didn't say anything.
I'm supportive of leaving it the way it is.
Yeah.
What was that, Mr. Waldenberg?
Supportive of leaving the calendar as it is.
And I don't have a strong feeling either way. I was just,
Sort of covers
Agreed.
it.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. Fun discussion though, Mr. Keener. I appreciate, getting us all riled up for a few minutes.
I aim to please. It was
I
a
know you
dull
did.
meeting so far.
Undying hate, please. I know. Yeah.
No offense. Mr.
That's all we have for ed programs.
Let's take a recess until 6:30.
To do what? I'm sorry.
Oh, never mind. Well.
I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and go home.
Uh,
Y'all are cool with that?
Well, I'm thinking about people's schedules and the fact that some people may need to depart regardless.
We don't need to depart quite yet.
So we should continue on.
Continue on, yes.
Do people, who wants to take a break?
No.
No one? Okay.
No, I want to get to the high school.
Day.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Parent night.
Yeah, the back to school night. High school starts
Let's go.
started 25 minutes.
Okay.
ago, So
Yep.
move.
All right, we will go back to the policy, personnel, and legal portion of the agenda, moving to 609, investment of district funds, Mrs. Hall.
There are no changes to policy 609 or 613, which is the one that follows it. Cooperative purchasing, those have stayed the same. They are accurate with our practice.
Does anyone wish to discuss either policy 609 or 613? No changes are being recommended. Very well, seeing none, we will move both of them to second reading. 614 payroll authorization and 615 payroll reduction, I believe they were both de minimis changes.
Correct. 614 only further clarifies how overtime is approved by the district. It is not approved by Mr. Burmercy because we are far too large. So that is broken out. And then 615, we just changed that payroll deductions don't have to be done on district forms because we get changes a multitude of ways through 403B providers and such. So that's just clarifying our actual practice.
Does anyone have any questions or concerns about the de minimis changes to 614 or 615? Seeing none, we will move both of them to second reading. 617 petty cash, again, Mrs. Hall.
Yep. Also minor changes to reflect what the practice has been for a number of years. The district, we do not keep petty cash boxes at any of the buildings any longer. There is less of a need given the fact that we now have purchasing cards and other ways to purchase things. We don't need cash. We do have petty cash boxes for things such as dances and sporting events that will be used by the high school or the athletics department. So that's really, so it all stays in the custody of the business office unless it is signed out.
So is that petty cash for those events or is that petty cash to go use to buy things?
It's to make change really when it, for
Okay,
the
so
event.
it's for the
So if we give
events.
you $300, 300 comes back and the rest gets deposited into student activities fund.
And could you clarify, did you say those are always kept here and then they're signed out per event?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
My only question / concern about this is, and I may be thinking about this in an outmoded way, is occasionally a building might have a legitimate petty cash need. The principal wants to buy pizza for a meeting or something like that. I would never want the building level administrators or staff to not be able to do something for lack of quick access to a minimal amount of money. If that is not something that is happening,
So the boxes have been out of the buildings for at least 2 years and we've not had an issue ever. We do have a purchasing agent who will work with them if they need to order something and get it quickly. I have gotten 0 complaints about
and if
this.
we ask all the principals, they would say the same thing?
I mean, if they don't, they should let me know.
Okay.
I've not
fair
heard
enough.
anything. I can't say what they're going to say, but
Cash is going away anyway, so I mean, this policy will be obsolete in a couple of years.
Next month.
Okay, any other questions or concerns about 617 petty cash? All right, there is a substantive addition there, so we will move this to first reading. And finally, 619 district audit. Again, no changes are recommended.
Correct.
Anything you'd like to say, Mrs. Hall?
no, that actually is accurate to our current practice.
Does anyone have any questions or comments about 619? Seeing none, we will move that to second reading. Anything else for policy, personnel, or legal? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Wagner, is there a second?
Second, I get you on the board meeting though. You get me on the committee.
Second by Mr. Maris. All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.